So welcome everyone here to a little bit of time with human accent. Today we've got some guests with us, Dominic and Roy from Cohesion Collective, both co-founders. It's a diversity, inclusion and equality specialist firm, I think I could describe it that way. And I just wanted to unpack something that I found quite interesting today. I was reading a specific article and they were describing what they called the behavioral immune system. And in essence, just like a body would have an immune system protected from outside virus or bacteria, so people have developed a psychological immune system. When they spoke about this behavioral immune system, they spoke about 4 key aspects. Obviously, we're not going to unpack them in the detail, but I'm going to ask you a couple of questions around them. So the one was the fact that a behavioral immune system will often display a disgust response. So I'm going to ask you about that, where anything that's seen as unclean creates literally like a disgust response. Then there's the concept of conform or leave. And then the other one is heightened moral vigilance, where we become far more judgmental. And the other was outside is seen as quite a threat. The outsider becomes more prolific. So what are your thoughts in terms of psychologically and in terms of exclusion? What are your thoughts around the disgust response in SA and what you're dealing with?
Kick it off first.
Sure. So the disgust response is not biological.
Okay.
Actually,
interesting.
It is sociological. That we have internalized as biological. So some food would trigger a physiological disgust response in me, but not another person, only because of how we were socialized and brought up.
Okay.
So tripe, for example, which is not a common thing I'd ever eat, would maybe, but that's because of how we've been socialized. So it's not biological, it is in fact taught, right? And I think that's important, because then we realize that this disgust response is actually a learned behavior. The coronavirus isn't creating a disgust response, it's allowing us the legitimacy to express our disgust response without feeling bad and, ooh, I'm racist or whatever.
Yeah, no, very good.
Because it's bringing nothing new. So part of a lot of our discussions with the coronavirus coming through, and when we've been thinking around what the impact of the coronavirus would be within the society would be globally, it really came down to the realization that which this global pandemic has brought about is actually nothing new. There's nothing that has changed within our system. All it has done is just force us to actually look at that which was broken before the coronavirus began. Mm-hmm. The mentality of protectionism, the mentality of you must conform or leave, nothing different as prior to coronavirus. So for example, if you think of our societies, if you think of even corporates, given the particular South African historical context, the black people that make it in South African corporates are the ones that have learned very well to conform, are the ones that have learned to assimilate. Because the more you assimilate, the more you conform, the safer you seem to the system. And the safer you are to the system, the more the system will accept you. And so people like myself who went to these former Model C schools from like the age of 10, we started learning very early, because the way in which I spoke the English language, the way in which I commanded the English language, I could see immediately solicited a different response of respect and the level of intelligence that people thought I had. And that was part of the conform or leave. And so in order to survive in that space, you need to conform, because if I speak beautifully, then the system will accept me.
Which you do.
However, if I come and speak in the way in which I would have grown up given my surroundings, then all of a sudden I would have been seen as a troublemaker, or the person that does not have potential in order to be able to thrive within the space. So coronavirus is changing nothing, it's only revealing that which the system had that was existing.
So when there's crisis, whatever, there's a spike in moral vigilance and a dip in tolerance for anything that seems deviant. So what are your thoughts around this moral vigilance?
Morals among certain communities enable those communities in order to organize life in a particular way. What are we agreeing to?
Totally.
What are the things that we value within our communities? Because from the value system flows how it is that we will behave ourselves and how it is that we're going to respond in particular situations. If part of my values is that, stealing is something that is immoral. It will always inform how it is that I respond when there is an opportunity to steal.
Yes.
If part of my values is that corruption is something that is hurtful to my community, it will always inform how it is that I carry myself when there is an opportunity to be corrupted. And so it's really understanding that there is a context regarding what are these values, what are these principles, what are these morals that we're all agreeing with in order to make our societies functional. But absolutely, as our societies grow, as our societies go forward, we do need to find those moments to reflect regarding that which is serving us and that which is not serving us.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
which is constructive, that which is no longer constructive. And for me, so long as that which we are subscribing to collectively is something that is constructive, is something that is just, where there's nobody that is mistreated as a result of that which we're saying we're ascribing to as our morals. When those serve us, absolutely we can subscribe to them. But at the point at which we can see that there is harm that is visited against other members of our communities, and that harm also serves to devalue and dehumanize them, that's when we absolutely need to look at those things quite soberly.
They did a study and it came out that people that were less attractive, based on the social norm, high cheekbones, whatever, you've got your what's seen as attractive, and those that were less attractive according to that median, they were seen, the study came out that they were seen as more of a threat just for being less attractive than others.
Yeah.
Now,
How do you understand that?
What are your thoughts on that? And outsiders, like how do we define outsiders in SA, and what do we do with them? Because imagine, have you seen me without makeup? Hey, I can be super threatening. So I'm just like floored. So
Have you ever heard of pretty privilege before?
no, I haven't.
Well, it's all part of the same thing.
Yes.
This is all about systems of privilege and oppression. That's all we're talking about. And pretty privilege is 100% a absolutely real thing.
Yes.
And this is irrespective of race. Obviously, what is considered pretty has a racial element, but there are still pretty black people who have way different experiences, and that also is, we could chat about this all day, but pretty privilege is a real thing. So it makes total sense, again, that one plugs into a system where something is seen as more valuable than the other.
Yes. Some scientists, bright brains, decided to design an artificial intelligence software that would construct the most beautiful face on Earth. So essentially they provided inputs to this artificial intelligence regarding those features that are deemed to be desirable. And surprise, surprise, the most beautiful face on Earth was this, white woman and so forth and whatever other things that were constructed that the AI produced. And the thing is, it's very important that we begin to interrogate that which historically we've been taught to accept and what it is that we've deemed to be the standard and where beauty is concerned.
Yeah.
White people are 10% of the human family on Earth.
Yeah.
Right? 10%. But given how it is that we've given our very recent history, with the colonization, with the slavery, with the establishment of white as the standard to which everyone that is called non-white ought to live up to, it's very important that we are aware of these things. When I think about the image of the rapist in South Africa is the black man. Never mind, we've got an entire race that has been created in this country, rooted in the rape of black women. But we are the ones that carry the image of the rapist.
Very interesting.
And so it's very important for us to understand history. It's very important for us to understand our history of violence. It's very important to us to understand that when people are in positions of power and they begin to project their own badness on others, it essentially provides them with the permission to treat them in different ways. There was a book that was written by a man who was a Native American Indian. And what he said of the settlers who came from Europe, he said, you call us savages so that you can treat us savagely.
What would you say would be the first couple of steps that a person would need to take to internally readdress their bias?
There is this idea that how we behave, how I behave, is common sense, right? That how we show up in the workplace and how we engage with one another is common sense. And if we see something as common sense, then then I expect everyone to be doing it. And for me, I think when we think about behavior changes, how do we start looking critically at the things that we do in our behaviors and our belief systems, not as common sense, not as universal, not as human even, as something that is constructed. The society that we've structured, these responses, are all there to protect a societal body that excludes people of color, women, gay people, disabled people, to which the disgust response latches on incredibly obviously, and that this society has constructed behaviors that seem common sense but are actually still there to sustain the exclusion that exists. And when I say society, just replace that with workplace. Hey, it's the same thing. So I think for us, how do we understand that the history that we have got is not common sense, particularly for those who look like me, who plug into multiple points of privilege, that my beliefs are not common sense beliefs, they are constructed beliefs, that my disgust responses are not biological, they are sociological, and then to go and understand the history, and that allows me, I think, maybe the opportunity to reflect.
The beauty of us as people is that we are different. But our difference does not necessarily mean that others are better or worse, it means that we are different. It doesn't mean that my way is superior to any other, my way is just different from the other person. Because if we can see the merit, if we can see the goodness, if we can see the beauty of different people and different approaches, it enables us not to be so arrogant to hold on to that which I believe, that everybody else ought to conform to what it is that I think is right. So I think often it comes with a deep sense of insecurity when you're insecure about your own self and now you're trying to project that which you believe to be the best on other people. That's when mistreatment begins. But when I can realize that other people also have ideas, also have ways of life, also have philosophies that really add to the beauty of the human experience, it enables me to keep the humility, to always be open to learning. Yes. And recognize that I can never be the expert, I can never be perfect. I am flawed just as everybody else, and therefore I'll always be open to continue to learn.
Yes.